This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin. Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. We do obviously have capital punishment in some states, in these United States. And there are states that have it on the books, but they rarely, if ever, use it. And there's a myriad of reasons. Most of the time, it's some kind of political issue. And then there are others that, in the words of Ron White, seem like they have an express lane, like Texas. But when you have a state that hasn't executed someone since 1999, and a case hits the news, and it's so profound that the governor of that state, Josh Shapiro, states that he is going to sign off on the execution of an individual. You know the crime has to be chilling, to say the least. And to add another layer to this, we're talking about the accused being a female. Today, we're going to discuss a case that is arguably one of the most disturbing things that I've come across and that Dave has come across in the last couple of months, and it is like a sucker punch to the back of the head. Horribly tragic. We're going to talk about the death of a precious little one named Leon, and what appears to be an assault on his twin brother. And oh, by the way, these children are not just children. They're babies. They were only 6 weeks old. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, this case has... I don't know where to begin, really. I'm really going to need your help, and I'll help you too. It's this is something that really grabbed me by my guts. The tragedy in this, and we're going to talk about the alleged perpetrator in this case. But Dave, we've got there is nothing, and I've made my position very clear on this. There is nothing more precious in this world than sweet little babies. I love babies. I hate to see harm come to them. And this is so over the top. And the circumstances are so bizarre that I'll put it to you this way. I'm glad I'm not an investigator on this case. I'm glad that I can take like this, 30,000 foot view of it and kind of talk about it from our perspective on a podcast, as opposed to being on the ground working it. It's damaging. It's damaging, I think, to the minds of people that are having to observe all this and begin to try to put the pieces together here, man.
I can't imagine how investigators deal with things like this. I mean, for real, because you are talking about babies, and we're talking about twins that are 6 weeks old, and you're talking about a trusted family friend. Here's the deal. Nicole Virzi is pursuing her PhD in behavioral medicine at University of California, San Diego. She's friends with the parents of these twins, and she travels from San Diego to Pittsburgh to basically give them a break, get to see the kids, and that's what it was all set up to be. Now, there has been some confusion because people can't understand how this could happen. And I'm with them. I don't know. I just know that the facts are very, very thin, very straightforward. Nicole Virzi was staying in an Airbnb apartment about a mile away from where the parents of Ari and Leon Katz were living. And she comes to town. She is babysitting the children when their parents go out on a Saturday afternoon. Nicole Virzi takes a picture of Ari because she sees that he's got some blood in his diaper and his penis is swollen. She takes a picture of this and sends it to the parents. Getting this picture, they immediately come home and they grab Ari and they head to the hospital. It's about 6:00 Saturday evening. And while they are gone, they leave Nicole Virzi with Leon, the other twin. And about 11 o'clock that night, Nicole calls and says, hey, Leon bumped his head. He's not acting normal. One of y'all needs to come home. And so the dad says, call 911. I'm on my way. And so at 11:15, Nicole Virzi calls 911. And her story, Joe, was that she had fallen asleep on the couch. The baby was in his little bouncy seat. And when she woke up to him crying to get a bottle, she gets the bottle. And as she's in the kitchen, she hears a thud. And she comes back into the room and finds Leon on the floor with his head bumped.
Yeah.
That's the story she told. That's the story she sticks with to this day, Joe. And Leon was treated by medics and taken to the hospital. And it got ugly.
Yeah. I mean, developmentally, first off, one of the big questions I have, and I'm going to limit my comments on the front end here to Leon. Okay. Right now.
Right.
I'm thinking 6 weeks old. This child, I'm going back in my memory bank. I don't think a 6-week-old can roll over. And you're talking about this dynamic of being in, and they're calling it, when I heard it at first, they're calling it a bouncer. Mm-hmm. And I'd really like to know more about this device. And this is one of the things that we do in death investigation or forensics. If a child is in some kind of conveyance, or they're in some type of device that, say, for instance, it's suspended between two doors, and I'm thinking of an older child here that is truly a bouncer, where they can bounce up and down in this thing. And then you've got these little, I know because my grandbabies had them, they're like a little electronic, I don't know how to describe it. You lay the child down and the thing kind of vibrates and it will bounce up and down. I'm thinking they're in a reclined position and it helps them sleep. And I'm thinking, how does a 6-week-old fall or roll out of something like that? The dynamic of it would be quite troubling. And just so that our friends know, when you're in forensics and you're a death investigator, particularly when it comes to kids, you'd be surprised, Dave, perhaps. I don't know, maybe you wouldn't. I have brought back to the office any number of devices, cribs. I've disassembled cribs. I've brought cribs back intact to the medical examiner's office so that we could actually take a look at them and examine them. Food, anything the child is eating, I'll bring it back. I'll just take it from the scene and bring it back, and we'll take a look at it, because one of the things that you're looking for, particularly when it comes to children, is if a child falls out of something, it even extends out further than the welfare of that particular child. You're looking at something, if it is being sold to the general public, you're wondering if there's some kind of fault in the mechanism. And those things, those recalls go out all the time. So we suspect those sorts of things. And of course, there's always in the back of our mind, we're always thinking homicide too. Because, babies just don't, simply pass away. And I know that there are people out there that are maybe thinking, well, this could be a SIDS case. No, it couldn't, because actually on the low end of SIDS, this doesn't hit that mark chronologically. You're generally looking at SIDS generally runs from about 2 months to 10 months. So our suspicions get up. It raises our suspicions. If you're under that 2-month mark in the age, and if you're over that 10-month mark and you're heading out to a full year, that's not, we still don't know what actually causes SIDS.
And with SIDS, you don't have damage to your skull either, right?
No, you don't. And that's one of the issues with Leon here, Dave. And we can explore that further, but yeah, he did sustain a head injury. And look, I mean, babies can injure their heads. They can. But here's the problem. In order for a relatively newborn child to sustain a fracture to the skull is the exception and not the norm.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Dave, okay, I'll give people, I hate to say I'm going to give anybody the benefit of the doubt. However, all right, what are the odds? What are the odds that you could have twins and within this time frame, this window, you would have both twins sustain serious, and this is not something, this is not like a scratch. It's not even like the kitty cat came up and scratched the little baby's hand. We're talking significant trauma. What do you think the odds are with twins that both of the children are going to sustain catastrophic injuries? I got to tell you, I'm not buying it. It doesn't sit well with me at all if I'm an investigator on this, man.
To look at the injuries, it might be, from my way of thinking, looking at the first injury, the first child, because yes. I was trying to figure out what was going on in the dynamic of the adults, the parents here, and how come Nicole was there, and I really, because you're thinking there's got to be more. And there really isn't. There really is a situation where Nicole Virzi is friends and connected to the parents, to the mother in particular, on an intellectual level. They studied the same things and got to know one another while they studied the same things. And Nicole kind of got close to them from that standpoint. And they bonded, as students of the same stuff. And when the children came, as you've mentioned a couple of times, twins are double the fun. They are, everything is twice. I remember my mother had twins. They're 6 years younger than I am. And I remember everything about how much time and energy was spent.
Gosh. Yeah.
And it's substantial. And anyway, so it seems to me Nicole Virzi was being the best friend to the couple she could be.
Holy smokes, I can't believe you're just saying this, because I was thinking look, I don't want to make too much of this, but if you're a parent and you're dealing with two newborns, she's going to seem like an angel descended from heaven that has lighted on your doorstep to say, you guys go and take a break. I got this. I got it for a few hours, and hey, I'm going to get a bed and breakfast here or whatever it is, an
Apartment, Airbnb, yeah.
I'm going to stay there, and I'll be right down the street, and all you have to do is call me. I just care about you guys so much and just love you guys so much. I'll be at your disposal. I want to help you out. This is how I can help out. And I don't know. I'm thinking about this. This person, they're in your life. And I'm not one of these people that ever handed my kids off to total strangers. It's not my gig, man.
Right.
I don't do that.
Yeah.
It's the most precious thing I have. And so if you have somebody that's going to appear and it's going to offer the service to you, yeah, man, wouldn't it be great just to go out and just breathe?
Be a couple.
Just for a moment. Be a couple, maybe get a cup of coffee, glass of wine, just relax, and maybe for a moment reflect upon everything that you've just come through. Imagine this, leading up to a birth, and then 6 weeks down range from the birth, just to take a deep breath. Who would ever think that when you're walking out the door, this is the last time that your little family is going to be completely intact, these precious little angels. Yeah. I don't know. There's no way I would ever fault the parents in this.
No. Nicole Virzi's not a child, Joe. She's 30 years old. She's a fifth-year PhD student at UC San Diego.
Yeah.
She's not a child. She is an adult woman offering to help you when you need help at a wonderful time. The kids are 6 weeks old, and it's just, again, I'm not faulting the parents at all. But Nicole Virzi, actually, when I looked at this show, and I think I said this to you, it seems to me she had a plan, because Ari Katz suffers injuries to his groin area. He's got scratches on his face that Nicole Virzi claims were from getting him in and out of the car, that, he scratched himself or whatever. None of this makes sense for a 6-week-old that I can remember. And I think, well, it's been a long time since I've been around a baby that young, but I don't remember at 6 weeks old them even being able to hold their head up yet.
No, they're weak as, just weak as like little newborn kittens. And here's something with Ari. It might be the correct.
I apologize.
I'm not really sure, but with this little angel, I'm thinking, let's take a look at these injuries that that are being stated right now. The medical examiner has related to the public. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, Ari is the first child that was kind of like the way to get both parents out of the house with that child, so that Nicole would have just one child, Leon, to focus on. Because look at the injuries to Ari. She had to take a picture of these injuries and send it to the parents. They were out doing whatever. And so she sends a picture, and it has blood in the diaper. It shows that the penis is swollen and those injuries to the groin area. And she's, taking a picture saying, hey, y'all need to get this looked at. Something's going on here. And so they do. They come home and they get Ari, and they go to the hospital and leave Nicole alone with Leon.
But how do you assess it? If you're in parental survival mode, the first thing you want to do, if this has been brought to your attention, as obviously it was with Ari, you're thinking, okay, I got to get my child treated. I've got to explain this. And if you're a new parent, and I can reflect back and think about the first time that my children were injured in any way, and you think the world is going to come to an end, how much more so with a 6-week-old? And this is serious trauma, Dave. I mean, this is very serious, because I got to tell you, the way they've outlined this with Ari, okay, they've stated that, as you had mentioned, she had sent this picture of the diaper, and it contained blood. Well, hell yeah, it's going to contain blood, because his penis is swollen, and I would assume that there was probably some type of internal damage, maybe to the bladder. I'm not really sure, or to the urethra, perhaps. Little babies, their penises don't just kind of traumatically begin to swell like this without some kind of force acting upon it. And then you've got him voiding blood into his diaper. Here's another thing that is really, if this couldn't get any more troubling with Ari, Dave, he's got bruises inferior to his belly button. Okay. Now
when you say inferior, what does that mean?
Yeah. So inferior, the way when we observe, okay, in medical legal death investigation, we talk inferior as opposed to superior. So superior, if you're talking about the navel, the belly button, so anything above, and you have to have an anatomical point of reference. This is one of the things that we do in forensics, is that because what we're stating by talking about these things, you have to have an anatomical orientation in order if this is going to move forward in a case, so that the jury can understand it, and it opens the door for a forensic pathologist on the stand to say, okay, so we're going to say this anatomical landmark, the navel, the belly button, the umbilicus, if you will, that is, anything above that is superior, okay, but that's still going to be like inferior to, say, the sternum, okay, but it is that point of reference, the belly button. These injuries are inferior that this baby sustained, and it looks to be, at least from what they're saying, they're calling it bruises, but you have to think about this. This is a contusion. Well, how do we get contusions, Dave? Well, that most of the time is going to rise out of a direct impact, brother. So you just don't get a random bruise. And if it's, I'm curious to know if there are multiple bruises. And so this is the way it works. If you have multiple bruises, all right, most of the time, those are going to be indicative of multiple impacts. Okay, so if you have like one bruise singularly, that could be evidence of maybe you fall, you strike an object, and I've had people do this. They fall from a height or maybe down a staircase. And I'll have abdominal bruising, but it's really hard to bruise the abdomen. You don't get it a lot unless it is, you see it a lot in car accidents, because think about this just for a second. Everybody at home, just kind of think about this. When you know that an impact is coming, one of the things you do with your body is you kind of contract, you kind of roll over or roll forward to have an exposed abdomen. You're talking about, and that would make sense with a baby. They're completely exposed. They don't have those reactive impulses like we do as adults. So you've got this thing that is inferior below the belly button. Well, what's the dynamic going on here? How do you generate that kind of insult to the body of a 6-week-old? Well, to me, I would look for, nothing is off the table. First off, I'm going to see if there's any kind of associated abrasion overlying the so-called bruising or contusion. And what that could be indicative of is that an instrument was used, and it creates this kind of friction on the skin. Okay, it can be striate, it kind of in these little lines, or it can, if the object that is being used has a rough surface on it, it'll slightly abrade or tear the skin superficially, and then there'll be an underlying impact area that generates the hemorrhage. Or if you're just talking about a punch like this, you're generally not going to get an abrasion with that. You'll just have this concurrent bruise that happens as a result of those little vessels being broken beneath this. So if you've got a bruise that is presenting, now just follow my logic here. If you've got a bruise that is presenting on the lower abdomen below inferior, like we talked about, to the belly button, Dave, I'm really wondering, were there any bowel injuries to this child? Is there like a communicating contusion, area of hemorrhage in this little angel's, underlying bowel? I've seen this happen. And you get these little tears, in all these little vessels that are in the bowel, and child can bleed out. That's what makes this so horrible. That's, and this has really stood out to me. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to understand this dynamic and maybe a description of these, even more so, going down range with this case, just simply based upon the injuries that Ari sustained, and the scratches on the face. I think you and I, when we were talking about doing this case, and I'm so grateful you brought this to my attention, because I've been following other things, but I hadn't paid as close attention to this case. I know that it was in the news, but when you began to lay this out to me, Brother Dave, and I started hearing about this, I just knew that we had to do it. And we were talking yesterday about babies scratching themselves. And after we had that conversation, I began to think about my kids. Do you remember and I know that particularly mamas out there are going to remember this or know this. Do you remember those little mittens you would put on a child's hand? And they've got those sharp little nails. Those little fingernails are sharp. And one of the reasons you'd put those on their hands was because they can scratch. They'll scratch their face, because they're exploring their body and all that sort of stuff. So they put these little mittens. I don't know that this child would have necessarily scratched their own face. And how many of these scratches are there? And is there a pattern to them? Because I got to tell you, is the child being roughed up in any way? Are they being, is there some kind of surface they're being pressed down onto to generate a scratch? And when you say scratch, most of the time that implies person-to-person contact. Now, you can get scratched by, a limb, a thorn, but they're describing these as scratches, not abrasions. Abrasion happens generally with an object, or you're meeting a surface like a carpet or something. You'll get an abraded area. You and I used to be athletes years ago. You played baseball. You slid into, and how many times, I can only imagine how many times in your life you've had an abraded area, strawberry, if you will, and that's because you're making this contact. That's not what they're saying, Dave. They're saying this is a scratch. How do you generate this scratch on this 6-week-old? I'm thinking about the dynamic that's going on here. I'm thinking about, there's somebody that is the quote unquote caretaker of these two precious little souls. How long? When did it start? Did it start when mom and dad exited the house? How long had she been with them? Because time is everything here. We have to understand the timeline, and we have to understand all of these injuries and their dynamics, which eventually led to the death of Ari's brother, Leon.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Dave, we've talked about Ari Katz, about these injuries that wound up essentially getting this child to treatment at the hands of the parents. They're alerted. There's evidence that, something has occurred. Most of it is below the waist. But that leaves Leon. Ari was extricated from that home, and Leon is left with Virzi, Nicole Virzi, the PhD student. What can you break this down for me? Ari, they've taken Ari away.
Well, when you and I were talking about this, I was at that point of, she, being Nicole Virzi, Joe, found a way to get Leon alone. I mean, think about it for just a minute. When you were describing the bruising on Ari a few minutes ago, I hadn't thought about all that. I mean, because I was focused on the death of Leon Katz.
Yeah,
I wasn't, but the injuries to Ari are substantial enough that they go to the hospital, and we could do a whole episode on children abuse and how they're dealt with at the hospital. And we actually need to, because I have a question about what they would have done at the hospital with Ari. But for the sake of this program today, Ari is at the hospital with the parents. They're both concerned about him. They left Leon at home alone with Nicole Virzi. And all of this is alleged. She has pled not guilty, said she didn't do anything. And her story is that she fell asleep on the couch. She woke up. Leon was in his little bouncy seat, and he was hungry for milk. So she went to the kitchen to get some milk. And when she returned, she heard a thud while she was in the kitchen, and then him crying. And when she came in, he was on the floor laying on his side. Leon's injuries, the injuries to his head, and I said plural because it wasn't just one thump on the head. And Leon suffered and is laying on his left side. The left side of his head has been damaged.
Yeah.
I don't know how far to go with that because, Joe, there's so much else in there that I couldn't figure out, because I always thought, I know babies' heads you have to be extra careful with. They have that big soft spot, you know?
Yeah.
And that always terrified me. It even does now.
It does.
It still does now.
It does.
Because holding a baby, I even though I've had all my children, dude, that's still the scariest thing in the world. You've got this soft spot on the top of their head that the brain's right there. You got to be really careful. And I'm thinking of 6-week-old Leon Katz in the care of Nicole Virzi, and she claims he fell out of a bouncy seat. Detectives said it was an 18 inches at the highest point of the bouncy seat, 18 inches to the floor, and there's no way this child could have been damaged in this 18 inches that there is. So how in the world could it be possible for Leon Katz to end up with the injuries that he suffered, Joe?
Let's go back. I'm very glad that you brought up this idea of the soft spot. And did you know that there are multiple so-called soft spots? They're actually referred to as fontanelles. And so,
as what?
Fontanelles.
Okay.
And so you have, and what they are points of attachment for the plates of the skull. All right. So you have something that occurs that's actually suture fusion that goes on with the skull. So if people will just envision, like Halloween, for instance, they do these renderings of skeletons. Okay. And you'll see a skull, and, you walk into one of these stores, and wherever they're selling skulls, they will do some kind of facsimile of a suture line on a skull. If you look at it, it's these kind of wavy lines, and they run everywhere. And you've got these major bones. You've got the frontal bone, which is like your forehead, and then you've got the parietal, some people call parietal, that is lateral, and it's up, okay, and it's pretty thick. But you go below that, and you've got the temporal areas, and they talk about that's like the most delicate area of the brain. And you go posterior in the back of the head, you've got what's referred to as the occiput, and it's that kind of, there's like a bony prominence that everybody can feel. If you'll just reach around the back of your skull, there's a knot on the back of your head, and that's the bony prominence that's referred to as the occiput. And during developmentally, when a baby is developing in mommy's tummy, their skull is very malleable. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First off, there's kind of this idea that women have this tough thing that they have to do, and that is, if it's a vaginal delivery, this child, along with the head, has got to pass through the birth canal. Well, you cannot have a rigid skull like mine is right now. A grown person's skull that can pass through a birth canal. Because we've had time over the years, Dave, for our skulls to ossify essentially, and they become rigid. They become almost like a helmet, if you will. I always compare them, and when you see them in the morgue, they almost have a turtle shell appearance to them, for good reason. They offer protection. For babies, though, and this is one of the things when we talk about Leon's injuries, they're talking about fractures, Dave. Okay. And it's one thing if a child is 6 years old, because by the time they've hit 6, generally it's around, I'm going to get this wrong, I have to reflect back in my memory. By the time a child is about 3, I think, these fontanelles, and there's multiple of them. You have one, the most prominent one is anterior, so it's on the front, not all the way on the front, but it's where the frontal bone and the parietal bones, come together, and you've got that real soft spot, and it's very tender. I mean, it's when you see it, it has a membrane-like appearance. It's a bit thicker than that. Then you have them that are lateral as well on both sides. And then there's a posterior one on the back side. Now, these are smaller than the one on the front. So the one on the front, people commonly think of. Well, they haven't had a chance to ossify and on any level. So the bones aren't firm. They're just merely these kind of plates that almost when you touch them, they almost have more like a cartilaginous feel to them. Dave, they're like that. What do we know about developing children? They fall. They fall, buddy. They fall when they're trying to walk or cruise, where they're walking along or just, just crawling. When you get a child that's like that, the skull is still very malleable so that it won't fracture. Okay. The fact that we're talking about Leon here, Leon Katz, and he has got a fracture, Dave, to his skull. This, in order for a 6-week-old child to sustain a skull fracture, you're talking about, relative to the child, you're talking about a very significant amount of force that would have to be applied to this bony feature. And it's not really, when we think of bony, you think bony, hard rigidity. It ain't like that, dude. In the morgue, and I don't want to be too grotesque here, but I mean, this is body bags. When we have to do autopsies on babies, we don't use saws. You can actually open the skull with a pair of scissors. That's how soft they are. So the fact that Leon has this fracture that they're calling here, and also they're talking about multiple, Dave, they're talking about multiple areas of hemorrhage within the brain. Brother, I got to tell you, there's a lot going on here. I'm wondering if this is a single impact or if there are multiple impacts here. This can be evidenced on the exterior scalp. You're going to be able to see, I would imagine there would have been, refresh my memory again. You said that Leon was found, his head was contacting the left side, right?
Right.
According to Virzi, correct?
Again, everything we have is according to her. And that's the part that kind of bothers me about when we're talking about it, because we only have her version of events at this point. And she claims that she heard the thud. He was crying and then heard the thud, and she came in and he was laying on his left side, and the damage to his skull was on the left side. None of this makes sense to me. I know what you do in caring for a child. When we're talking about the soft spot on top of the head, I'm telling you, even now, I get chill marks because I remember being so afraid and being told by the doctor, look, the head is very soft and it takes time to heal, and it's a long time before it actually becomes the skull that we know. And
yes,
her version of events does not make any kind of sense for a 6-week-old baby.
No,
at all.
It doesn't. let me also frame this out, Dave. Now, we could, literally, I've got friends that teach physics at Jacksonville State. We could give them the parameters for this. We could talk about the weight of a baby. We could talk about the height of a fall, and do this myriad of calculations. And they have done this before. What type of height would a child with these anatomical features at this particular time in their development, what type of height would you have to fall from in order to generate this kind of energy? And this is done in car accident reconstruction all of the time. And Dave, it's, brother, listen to me here. It's more than 18 inches. And that's top end. Okay. If the seat is configured in the manner in which you're thinking, I think that even if this child or a child at this stage was on a kitchen counter,
Mm-hmm.
and they fell from that height, and I think that's something you can kind of get your mind around. I don't know, what is that? Is that like 36 inches?
Probably.
I'm not really sure. And they vary from place to place. And the surface also has a lot to do with it. Are you falling onto a hardwood surface, onto a ceramic surface, or a carpeted surface? We don't know. Right. That's going to have a lot to do with it as well. But 18 inches ain't getting it, man. I'm just telling you, if I'm an investigator in a case like this, I'm going to have a lot more questions. I will have so many questions that it would take days and days to answer them all, because none of this is making sense to me with the explanation we've been provided with.
When she called 911,
yeah,
she actually told them the baby fell out of a bassinet. Now, the reason I point that out is because most of us know if a story changes, it's because they're lying. The story doesn't change when you're telling the truth, because the truth is the truth. A lie has to change to fit current circumstances. And she has already talked to Ethan Katz, the father, before she calls 911. And so she's told him something, and then she calls 911, tells them bassinet. And then when the police get there, it was out of the bouncy seat, which they measured. Highest limit was 18 inches, and no way possible to create these types of injuries to this 6-week-old baby from that height. Even if her story were to be true, it doesn't match the injuries. And the other part of this show that really got to me was when this PhD student that Daily Mail calls glamorous, she actually arrives back at her apartment. Okay, mom and dad are at the hospital with their children, with the babies that, again, Nicole Virzi came there specifically to help them care for these 6-week-old twins. And now both children are in the hospital. Remember, all the time that we're dealing with Leon here, Ari is still in the hospital being examined to figure out how he ended up with his injuries while Nicole was watching him. So now these parents, Ethan Katz and Savannah Roberts, are at the hospital. They now have both of their children there. Nicole Virzi is not there with them. Now, an innocent person who did nothing wrong would be at the hospital, I would think, just being there. I love you. I'm here for you. I don't, this happened on her watch. No, she gets back to her apartment around 1:30 in the morning. The apartment she had planned on staying in for another couple of days, packs her stuff and is headed out the door. This is all captured on security cameras.
Holy smokes.
At 5:45 the next morning, Joe, she's outside. She's got her bags packed. She's on the phone. Police arrive. This is before Leon Katz is pronounced dead at the hospital. Police are there and they arrest her. Have you ever seen anything like that, Joe?
No, I never have. That's why this case it's absolutely bananas, and it's sickening. And here's something else, Dave. Going back to my my earlier opening comments about the last time the death penalty was actually followed through with in Pennsylvania. From all accounts, it was a lethal injection. I think it was 1999. Okay, they have it. This is, if you can read between the lines, all right, if you can read between the lines, when the Allegheny County prosecutor, now this is a statement that they have made, and this is not going to be verbatim, but we're talking about something, Dave, that has just happened. They know something. They have seen something, because the DA's office in Allegheny County came out and said, we are seeking, now hear me right, we are seeking the death penalty in this case. And when you hear that, and they're also throwing the word torture around. And if that doesn't send a chill up your spine, I don't know what will. And in addition to this, politicians say things for a variety of reasons, obviously. But when you've got an elected official like the chief prosecutor for Allegheny County, which is where Pittsburgh is, and now you kick it up to another level where the governor of the state is now saying that he's going to sign off on the death penalty on this. You put it before me, I'll sign anything you want me to sign to make sure that this is followed through with. There's a lot more to be revealed, and I promise you this, my friends. My friend Dave Mack and I, we will be revisiting this case, because more information is going to come out, and when it does, I don't know how we're going to be able to take the measure of it, but we're going to sally forth and talk about this, because two little babies, and trust me, these are precious little fragile babies, have been horribly assaulted, and one, it appears, has been murdered. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.